Now, a Fulton County judge sentenced a man to life in prison after killing a woman he met on a dating app.
Channel 2 investigative reporter Ashley Lincoln was the only reporter in the courtroom when the judge handed down that sentence and spoke exclusively with the district attorney about it.
Love can be intoxicating, a mysterious and thrilling journey into the unknown. It can open doors to happiness, connection, and companionship, but for some, it becomes a fatal game, a descent into chaos that ends in tragedy. In this chilling tale, we unravel the story of a woman whose pursuit of love through a dating app led her into the arms of a dangerous stranger, a man she thought she could trust, but who harbored a dark obsession. What begins as a budding romance quickly spirals into a deadly encounter, leaving a trail of shattered dreams and devastating loss.
Tuesday, part of the unit spoke to me after the defendant was sentenced in the 2019 murder of Fabiola Thomas.
This is a really sad case.
Her life mattered. She lived with purpose.
The modern world of dating is a double-edged sword. While apps promise to bring people closer, they can also open doors to the unknown. For Fabiola Thomas, a 29-year-old marketing professional, the idea of finding love online was both exciting and daunting. Fabiola was the kind of person everyone gravitated towards. Her smile could light up a room, and her laughter was infectious. She was a planner by nature, someone who believed in taking calculated risks. Joining a dating app was one such risk, a decision she weighed carefully. After all, meeting strangers online came with its share of horror stories. But Fabiola was optimistic. "It's just another way to meet people," she told a friend. Enter Antonio Wilson. His profile was charming, and his pictures were well curated. He had a way with words that made him stand out from the rest. Their initial conversations were lighthearted and engaging, filled with shared jokes and deep discussions about life. Fabiola felt a connection, one that seemed genuine.
Had invited her friends over to meet this new man in her life for the first time on Saturday. Then shortly after the get-together started, police say the two started arguing, and the suspect shot Wendy more than 10 times before fleeing to Louisiana.
Investigators believe the two met on a dating website just 1 week before that brutal murder.
Their first date was everything Fabiola hoped it would be. They met at a coffee shop in downtown Atlanta, a neutral space where she felt safe. Antonio arrived early, greeting her with a bouquet of daisies, a gesture that made her smile. The conversation flowed effortlessly. Antonio talked about his career in IT, his love for cooking, and his dream of traveling the world. Fabiola found herself opening up about her dreams and aspirations. By the end of the evening, she felt a flicker of hope that this might be the start of something real. But Antonio's charm had a darker edge. His eagerness quickly turned to possessiveness. "Text me when you get home," he insisted after their second date. "Good morning, beautiful," he messaged the next day. "Why didn't you reply last night?" Fabiola brushed off his intensity as enthusiasm, but the red flags began to accumulate.
Antonio Wilson to serve life without the possibility of parole for malice murder.
She unfriended Antonio Wilson the day before she died.
Senior ADA Nalda Charles says text messages show Wilson couldn't handle Thomas's rejection.
What if the person you trusted with your secrets had a secret of their own? A secret so dark it could cost you your life?
Senior ADA Nalda Charles says text messages show Wilson couldn't handle Thomas's rejection towards him before strangling her inside of her Roswell apartment. Attorneys say after Thomas rejected his advances, he found where she lived and attacked her in her home.
As the weeks went by, Antonio's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He would call her multiple times a day, sometimes just to ask where she was or who she was with. He began showing up unannounced at her favorite spots, places she had casually mentioned during their conversations. Fabiola's friends started noticing the change in her demeanor. "You don't seem like yourself," one friend commented during brunch. "Is everything okay with Antonio?" Fabiola hesitated. She didn't want to come across as paranoid. "He's just a little intense," she admitted. "But I think he means well." Her friends weren't convinced. "Just be careful," they warned. The tipping point came when Fabiola decided to end things. Antonio's possessiveness had become too much to bear. She sent him a message. "I think we should take some time apart. I need space." Antonio's response was immediate and chilling. "You can't just walk away from me like that," he wrote. "You'll regret this."
Through the Brenda Byam Domestic Violence Unit, named after Willis's late aunt.
Ultimately stabbed her to death in the back.
Tuesday, part of the unit spoke to me after the defendant was sentenced in the 2019 murder of Fabiola Thomas.
Over the next few days, Fabiola tried to move on with her life. She blocked Antonio's number and deleted her dating app profile. She thought she had taken all the necessary precautions, but Antonio wasn't done with her. He began stalking her, showing up outside her apartment and following her to work. Fabiola reported his behavior to the police, but without concrete evidence of a threat, there was little they could do. On the morning of the attack, Fabiola's roommate, Emily, left early for work. The apartment was quiet, and Fabiola took her time getting ready. She had no idea that Antonio was already inside, hiding in the shadows.
She only met him in public places. She would even meet him outside of friends' houses in parking lots. So it is very scary because Ms. Thomas did everything that you would, want to do.
The details of what happened next are both chilling and heartbreaking. Antonio ambushed Fabiola as she stepped out of her bedroom. The struggle was brief but violent. In a fit of rage, he strangled her with his bare hands. When Emily returned home that afternoon, she found Fabiola's lifeless body in the bathtub. The scene was haunting, a grim reminder of the darkness that had invaded their lives.
Wilson couldn't handle Thomas's rejection towards him before strangling her inside of her Roswell apartment.
My sister was attacked and murdered in her home.
Investigators discovered Thomas and Wilson had only dated briefly after meeting on a dating app.
The police quickly identified Antonio as the prime suspect. Text messages, surveillance footage, and witness statements painted a damning picture of his obsession and escalating violence. Detectives described the case as one of the most harrowing they had ever encountered. "It's clear this was a premeditated act," one investigator noted. "He was consumed by his need to control her." Antonio was arrested later that evening, showing little emotion as he was taken into custody.
Attorneys say after Thomas rejected his advances, he found where she lived and attacked her in her home.
This was a surprise attack. She did not know her attacker was coming that morning.
Jurors reached a guilty verdict in 30 minutes after seeing crime scene photos and hearing from Thomas's roommate, who found her body lying in a tub.
The trial was a media spectacle. Fabiola's family and friends packed the courtroom, their grief palpable. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence, including chilling text messages and graphic crime scene photos. Antonio's defense tried to argue that he had acted in the heat of the moment, but the jury saw through his lies. After just 30 minutes of deliberation, they returned with a guilty verdict.
And Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis says her office is proactively litigating domestic violence cases.
This is an issue that is really close to home for me.
Through the Brenda Byam Domestic Violence Unit, named after Willis's late aunt.
Fulton County judge sentenced Antonio Wilson to life without the possibility of parole for malice murder. During the sentencing hearing, Antonio showed no remorse, declining to speak or offer an apology. District Attorney Fonnie Willis, visibly emotional, addressed the court. "This case is a tragedy on every level," she said. "Fabiola did everything right. She set boundaries and took precautions. But in the end, she was betrayed by someone she trusted." Antonio Wilson wasn't just another man looking for love. He was a ticking time bomb of emotional instability. Behind his charming facade lay a dangerous obsession. Psychologists often point out that individuals like Antonio exhibit patterns of possessiveness and control that can escalate into violence. Dating apps have revolutionized how people meet, but they've also introduced new risks. For Fabiola, the promise of finding love online ended in her untimely death, a harsh reality faced by many victims of similar crimes. Experts who later analyzed the case suggested that Antonio's actions stemmed from a deep-seated fear of abandonment. This psychological trait, coupled with a lack of empathy, created the perfect storm for violence. Rejection can trigger extreme responses in individuals with certain personality disorders, explained Dr. Meredith Cole, a criminal psychologist. In A. Antonio's mind, Fabiola wasn't just ending a relationship, she was challenging his identity and control. The convenience of dating apps often comes at the cost of personal safety. These platforms make it easy to connect with strangers, but they also provide a roadmap for predators. Antonio used the app not just to meet Fabiola, but to gather information about her interests, routines, and vulnerabilities.
And Wilson showed very little remorse during that sentencing. He declined speaking or giving any statements during Tuesday's hearing. Reporting in downtown, Ashley Lincoln, WSB Tonight.
Fabiola Thomas's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the dangers lurking in the world of online dating. It's a cautionary tale about trust, obsession, and the devastating consequences of ignoring red flags. As we remember Fabiola, let her story serve as a warning to us all. Sometimes, the darkness we fear most is hiding in plain sight. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe.